Hey guys, Smitty here. Thanks for tuning in and welcome back. We're back in Valheim, back in our build series. And today we're going to be covering my recent mountain fortress build a little more in detail. So sorry it's taken a little bit for me to get this one out. The last couple of weeks have been pretty busy, but if you'd like to see the build process of this one, make sure you check out my previous video. But without further ado, grab a snack, grab a drink, and let's get right into it. Okay, so this build was a really nice exercise for me. As I mentioned in some of my comments to you all, I haven't really done a lot of stone-centric builds, so this is a really nice way to hone some skills in another material and learn some new techniques. Okay, so for the location, we are obviously in the mountains. I found this nice little overlook, which peers over some of the forests and the swamps in the distance, so naturally I felt like I needed to build some kind of garrison or fortress here, and I really like the result. The overall build really isn't that large. It's probably on the smaller side as like castle and fortresses go, but it still feels quite grand, and the detailing is really intricate and makes it feel quite significant despite its smaller size. But I think building something close to the edge of the cliffs like we have just also adds to the dramatic feel. So location is obviously very important to consider when starting a build, and I spend a lot of time searching out the right spot to start some of these projects. Alright, so if we start here from the bottom of the build, I really wanted it to feel like a defensive structure that limits the approach. So as you can see, if there are any invaders, they would have to attack from this side. So I just used some of the wood stake walls to block off some of the front here, and then as you can see, just some basic towers that could maybe house a guard or two, keeping watch with some bows at the ready. So as we work up to the next area, this is just a spot that perhaps guards are warming themselves while they're on watch, so a nice little fire / seating area. Then I've also doubled this spot as maybe a little bit of a training area with some training dummies. And so what I've essentially done here is utilize the armor stands, there's actually two here. So there's one that is facing forward with the actual armored figure, and then I used a second one, spun it around, and then placed a shield on it, just to get the look that I wanted, and I didn't want the shield on the back. So this could be a place where perhaps soldiers are practicing their striking or something like that. And then as we continue up here, there's just, again, another narrow approach up to the actual entrance to the fortress itself. So taking a closer look at the structure and stonework itself, although the base structure is rather simple, we've done some really nice detailing and layering to give our walls some depth. Stone has the propensity to look very bland and boring if you're not careful, and there are a couple of things I did here to make sure that didn't happen. So firstly, and one of the most important things to do, is to offset the stone pieces. And so what I mean by that is if you look really closely at the wall, these stone creases don't exactly line up. They're actually offset. And this is something that you would see in the real structure. Honestly, it's really subtle, but trust me, and this is kind of like a PSA to castle builders in Valheim, you have to offset your stone pieces. It'll make your structures look way better and much more realistic, and it's not always going to be possible. So for instance, if you look at the round tower, we aren't really able to alternate based on the rotation, but for things like the straight walls or like square towers like this, do your best to kind of alternate and offset your stone. It just, again, it looks a lot better. So another thing that we did is we utilized the stone foundation pieces as the bulk of my stone. So rather than just utilizing the rougher stone wall pieces for everything, I thought that the stone foundation had a little bit more of a refined look to it, and it pairs really nicely with some of the more traditional stone wall pieces. So a bit of mix of materials there, so it gives it a little bit of texture. Another benefit of utilizing the stone foundation pieces as my walls is that it gives me a lot of opportunity to create depth within the wall. So this is hugely important when dealing with stone. For instance, there are actually 4 different depth planes that I've created on this wall, and that all helps make this wall pop and not look so flat. So firstly, we have the recessed window that are midway within the stone, and so I'm able to do this because the stone foundation is so thick. I can basically put it midway through and just recess the window in there, and it looks really nice. So then we have the base walls themselves, which are again offset with the stone, and then a mixture of the stone foundation pieces and the traditional stone walls. The third, we actually have the columns that sit outside the windows and actually frame the windows walls and actually hold up this little lipped section on the roof, which creates another layer. And then finally, it's a really subtle plane, but these battlements that sit on top of these roof areas are just barely pushed out. So I actually just kind of custom placed them like a half space out. But then again, that just gave a little bit more depth. So again, it's quite subtle, but nonetheless really important to making stone look interesting and not so flat. So continuing with our tour, heading up through the entrance, we have a double gated door that leads to a storage area in the front. So nothing too crazy here, but nicely decorated and feels authentic to the build. As we turn around, we have a bit of an armory, so we utilize a lot of armor and item stands to decorate the area with arms, and then perhaps a war table where plans are being made. So then if we head into the base of the round tower, it's just another tucked away area with weapons. And I really like this area though, it's really compact and cozy. So heading up to the higher level, we have a kitchen / dining area of our keep. So we have a nice feast going on and a warm hearth to thaw the icy grasp of the harsh winter environment outside. I think this part of the fortress just feels really welcoming, and I wanted to create a space that was kind of a stark contrast to the cold of the mountain. So a bit of a refuge, if you will. Our kitchen is nicely decorated as well, with a nice island in the middle and various foods being cooked. I like how in the back we have some meats hanging as they're being prepared for a feast perhaps, and always nice to have an assortment of decorative pieces to make the area look lived in. So continuing on, we have our stairwell tower. Nothing too fancy here, just serves as a functional way to get to the rooftop. So then stepping out into the roof, we see that we have, again, our battlements surrounding all areas. And then it's complete with a lot of different like bows and rocks ready to defend the structure in case of an invasion. So I also made the decision to include these kind of rooftop structures that cap the build. Really, it's just an aesthetic design decision because I thought it'd make the build look a little bit more interesting and felt like a good way to switch up materials because there is so much stone in this build. So yeah, decided to go with some dark wood roof pieces just to kind of cap the fortress itself. So if we work way over this direction, we just have a small room with some bunks in it that perhaps some soldiers would be using. One of my main issues with this build is that I just wasn't really able to fit more beds in it. But at the end of the day, maybe soldiers would just be rotating some of these beds as they were exchanging the guard. So maybe they wouldn't need that many beds, or at least that's the story I'm going to go with. So finally, we just have the two towers. And so one thing I like about actually the circular tower is that we've broken up the face of it with some windows. And so when I initially built this up, it just seemed very flat and monochromatic with the stone. So I needed to break it up somehow. And so I came up with some window designs which add a nice sense of depth and detail and just make it look a lot less boring. So the square tower is nicely trimmed with the wood beams, which I think makes it stand out, but it's also the tallest part of the structure. So another point that I think makes this build look interesting is the fact that it's all on different levels. So for instance, if we look at the main structure, one area is slightly elevated over the other, and the same thing goes for the towers where they're not exactly the same height. One's a little bit taller than the other, so subtle differences like that can help make a build more interesting. Symmetry can be nice at times, but sometimes when you have slight wrinkles that make areas a little bit different, it just draws you more into the build because you don't know what to expect versus a 100% symmetrical build. Because in that case, when you've seen one side, you kind of seen the other, right? And you kind of know what to expect. But there you guys have it, the Mountain Fortress. Again, this was a nice little exercise in stonework. I don't do a lot of stone-centric builds, but definitely want to do more in the future. Hopefully I could pass on a little bit of wisdom here, and hopefully you guys learned a little bit of something. But if you did, please make sure you like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one. Thanks.